with that. So, okay, everybody's on their phone, which is good. No, you're not. Okay. All right. House Bill, we'll open the hearing on House Bill 2564, establishing the Farm to Food Bank program. And we'll call on Revisor Hamilton for a review.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. House Bill 2564 would establish a Kansas Farm to Food Bank program within the Kansas Department of Agriculture. And from what I understand, this is actually an existing program within the department, currently being paid for with USDA grants. And the idea for this bill is to enshrine that program into state law so it could continue if hypothetically the federal funding ceased. But KDA will go into more detail about that. I'm going to start by kind of skipping down to the bottom of the first page, section 3. The program would be required to acquire Kansas agricultural food products from agricultural entities or aggregators and distribute those products to the Kansas emergency food system. So just in that one sentence, we have about 3 different terms that are each defined in section 2 of the bill. So Kansas agricultural food products, that is defined in section 2E as food that has been grown, raised, or produced in Kansas. So the program would be required to they would be required to get those types of products from agricultural entities that's defined as a grower, producer, or processor of Kansas agricultural food products. And then they would distribute those products to the Kansas Emergency Food System. And that system is defined as food pantries, soup kitchens, hunger relief centers, or other feeding programs that, as an integral part of their normal activities, provide meals or food to needy persons. Such distributed food products would be required to be safe for human consumption and could only be distributed within Kansas. The program could use funds to purchase food products or facilitate the donation of food products, including, but not limited to, harvesting, packing, and transportation. The program could distribute funds to food banks with the infrastructure to accept, store, and distribute foods through the emergency food system in compliance with federal, state, and local health and food safety requirements. Foods could be sourced directly from the agricultural entity or through Kansas-based aggregators if such foods meet program requirements. The program would be subject to appropriation and would be required to dedicate not less than 75% of available funds to acquisition and distribution of Kansas agricultural food products. The Secretary would be required to engage food banks to administer the program. Such food banks would be required to collectively cover every county of the state and distribute food to food pantries and soup kitchens without duplication. Such participating food banks would be required to pass a scored third-party food safety audit and adhere to federal, state, and local health and food safety regulations. Such participating food banks would not be allowed to assess fees on foods from the program to recipient distribution sites, programs, individuals, or households. The Secretary of Agriculture would have certain duties in administering the program, including adopting rules and regulations to carry out the provisions of the Act. House Bill 2564 would become effective upon publication in the statute book. And with that, I'd be happy to take any preliminary questions.
Any questions for Mr. Hamilton? Representative Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The fiscal note says $1 million from SGF. What right now is the federal government dittying in?
I'll let the KDA answer that here in a bit. I believe maybe one of the grants at some point was $2.5 million, but they can go into more details.
Other questions?
Please.
Yes.
Describe to me on page 2, line 1, the word acquire. Taking, receiving.
Receiving.
And how? program shall acquire Kansas agriculture. How are they getting that? Is it donations or are they paying for it?
Right. From what I understand, they're voluntary contributions from those agricultural entities or aggregators.
Okay, and then line 21 on page 2, beginning, participating food banks shall collectively cover every county. So that's, obviously, we all know this, 105 counties. Do we even have that mechanism in place right now?
I'll defer to the proponents of the bill, which include some of those entities.
Okay, and then just one more. Starting in page 38, it says the secretary shall adopt rules and regulations to carry out the provisions, and then eligible costs. Again, I guess the question is, who's paying for this? It's actually going to not be in donations anymore. It's going to be $1 million out of SGF, right? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Gardner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, on page 2, line 4, number 2, it clearly states all Kansas agricultural food products distributed under the program shall be safe for human consumption and only be distributed within Kansas. Now, the responsibility for determining safe and the safety of the distribution system, could you explain to me, does that fall under the Secretary of Agriculture or someone else in the Department of Agriculture? And how is that different from the system we have in place now for distributing food through grocery stores and, we have a food distribution system now and safety standards in place. How will this be different and who will be responsible for the food safety here?
I'm not sure if there will really be a difference. Again, the KDA will be ultimately in charge of the program. It will be housed within KDA, and then they will be having the food banks administer the program. I would assume that the food banks will continue to be subject to portions of the food code that they are currently, but I don't have a more detailed response as of now. But after the conferees speak, I can always circle back if you have more questions.
Thank you very much.
Other questions for Kyle? Seeing none, thank you. Heather O'Hara, would you give us a quick update on the fiscal note?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. As Representative Jacobs indicated, the fiscal note is $1 million in fiscal year 2025 and 2026. The department also notes that the funding for the program is included in the current governor's recommendation for 2025. In addition, any administrative expenses would be negligible.
Okay, any questions for Heather? Seeing none, we will continue on. Yes, I'm sorry, Representative Jacobs.
Heather, thank you, Mr. Chair. Heather, do you know if the federal government has already indicated that we're going to lose these funds for this program right now?
Mr. Chair, Representative, I do not know, but if the agency cannot provide that answer, we'll circle back.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We may get that answer too from conferees. That's a good one to make sure if they don't address that, we can ask them from them. So, okay, let's continue on now. For proponents, first up is Kelsey Olson, the Assistant Secretary of Agriculture. Welcome back to committee. You have your high heels on.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. I am Kelsey Olson with the Department of Agriculture. We are a proponent of the bill 2564. I'm not going to walk through it. It's hopefully a fairly straightforward bill, as Kyle explained to you, but I do want to provide a little bit of background information as to why we're coming forward in support of this bill. In 2022, the Kansas Department of Agriculture applied for the local food Purchase Assistance Program. This was a program being provided by the USDA Agriculture Marketing Service Agency, and it was an opportunity that we saw to develop a program that would create a funding mechanism to purchase foods locally grown and provide them to the food insecure community in Kansas. So we worked, we applied for the grant, we received the grant, and the first round of grant funding was approximately $2.5 million. Developing that program, we partnered with the 3 Kansas food banks. There are 3 aggregators of food that provide food to the food pantry system throughout the state, and they cover all 105 counties. That's Harvesters, the Kansas Food Bank, and Second Harvest Community Food Bank. We worked with them to identify if this is something that they could even do, because they typically rely solely on donations. And so they were very willing, when we explained our vision as to what this program would do and provide funding to them, so to purchase food. And setting this up, we identified, based on the USDA guidelines, there was criteria to identify who would be eligible to be a producer that would participate. And we tried to keep it as vast and open as possible, meaning that all produce grown, raised, and produced, similarly to what we've described in this bill, would be eligible products. And then part of what the agency does is screen those entities who want to sell food to the food banks to ensure that they are meeting all of the food safety requirements that currently exist. We had roughly I believe it was about 62 producers who applied for the program, and were found to, there was 62 applied. 35 of those producers then said they wanted or were interested in providing an agreement to the food banks. At that point in time, KDA stepped out of the conversation. The food bank and the producer were able to negotiate their price that they wanted to meet on as and the quantity of the product that was being provided. So through that program, we had about 22 producers, Kansas producers, who were able to sell a variety of products to the food banks for distribution. Everything from produce, fruits, vegetables, we had pork, we had beef, as well as honey was an item that was sold, and cheeses. So we have spent approximately of the first $2.5 million, about $2.3 million has been spent thus far. The program nationwide has been very successful, and they have recently awarded the agency an additional $2.5 million. Those funds will be spent likely before the end of end of calendar year 2024. So this program, if supported and if the funding goes through, would extend what's currently being provided and would carry us through fiscal year 2025. I know it's confusing as we transition from calendar to fiscal year, but it would cover, federal funds would cover calendar year, and fiscal year, the state dollars would pick up for the fiscal year component. We've been proud to provide this program. I think you're going to hear from some other conferees that have seen success from it from a producer standpoint, and we are very supportive of seeing this program continue beyond the federal funding that's been currently provided. So with that, I would gladly take any questions that you may have.
Okay, questions for Ms. Olson? Representative Blex.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Kelsey, for your report. In this process, have you considered the impact that this program may have on already established local farmers markets? Because it looks like you got one that's probably all retail for the most part, and certainly bigger, and you know, that's part of your shop too. And 6-7 years ago, that was a bandwagon you was beating and to promote those, and I support that, but was there any consideration of what this potential impact might be on those markets already established?
So there certainly was. And I think for us, when we were looking at that evaluation, it was really viewing this as an additional marketing opportunity for those producers. They have the choice to go to the farmers markets. They have a choice to provide a proposed contract to sell to the food banks. And it was really based on their business model, where they were at in their own business plan of if it made sense or not. Because I might indicate that there were 62 who originally applied, and then only 35 of them wanted to offer up a contract to the food banks for consideration. So we don't believe it is taking away from what they might already be doing in that direct-to-consumer market, but this is an added market opportunity for those producers.
The impact of trucking, and obviously with 105 counties requirement, there's going to be some issues there, and I suspect a lot of the demand is going to be in somewhat the urban areas as far as pounds of produce, et cetera. Has this thing got built into the logistics, how you going to get from, say, Wallace County to Hayes process? Is that how you going to do that?
So it is worth noting that the bill specifies that the funds can be used to purchase the agricultural products. These funds, the proposed $1 million, would not be able to be spent on transportation of those products. The reason we worked with the food banks, and I think you'll hear from a representative today, is that that's what they are focused on. They are really a distribution center for across the state, and they rely a lot on transporting and moving those products that are donated to them, and in this case, food that they would be purchasing.
Okay. Thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Roth?
Well, you got my question there, and thanks for your presentation. So producers, does that mean even down to the local gardener that may have a garden in their backyard with an ample supply of produce, and they need to go somewhere with it?
Yes, our vision would be that anyone would be eligible to participate in this program. In fact, during the LFPA program, we did have some smaller producers who actually worked together and aggregated their food together, and a larger producer then added it to theirs and sold it to the food bank. So it was, in some regards, a very safe way for that small producer to explore trying to grow more, trying to grow at a larger scale, or just providing another outlet for what they already grow.
Okay. One more question. And my second question is, I'm a little confused. So this program buys from the producers, and it goes to the food bank, and the food bank, do they sell to the citizens, or do they give to the citizens?
They specifically give to the citizens, and one of the key elements in the bill is that the food banks are not to resell that product. It is for specific distribution.
Thank you very much, Chairman.
Representative Blex?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for indulging me for a second time. Let's say on the garden produce, what kind of safety measures and it always amazes me that you get a recall of lettuce from California. How are you going to track? Let's assume I refuse to pay the new proposed private applicator licenses fees, and I put something that's illegal on my garden produce, and then all of a sudden somebody gets sick. Do we have a mechanism in there to track where that comes from? I mean, because you're going to open up a lot of doors there. And right now, it appears that we at least have a pretty good system with our major producers of being able to track that back. Do you explain that to me?
So part of what we see the agency's position being is to ensure that anyone who is participating or offering to sell their products, is that they meet any potential licensing requirements based on the product that they're selling. So if they are selling produce, there is a threshold of anything over a certain volume, and I apologize, I don't have the specifics with me. But if they were going to sell in excess of X volume, that they would be properly licensed and trained. In the state of Kansas, if you fall with under that minimum, that would be on their own accord and outside our purview. Our food banks are licensees of our food safety and lodging program. They are subject to routine inspections, as well as sampling of products that they may have, which would be tested in our laboratory for any potential contaminants or informalities that should not be found in those products.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
If they're going to test any cookies, you might just send them out west first to make sure they make them.
I'll get your address.
All right. Is there an application for that? No, okay. Okay, and before we move on, so with this additional $1 million the governor has in her budget, the total program cost investment is $3.5 million then, is that right? 2.5 comes from the Fed?
Right now, we've received just over $5 million in total from the federal government over the span of the program. That's been two award amounts of 2.5 each.
So this began in COVID, correct?
It started in 2022. There's been multiple iterations of food programs that have been as a result of COVID, and I would say this is one of those iterations, but not a direct COVID reaction.
Okay. Representative Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I'm understanding this correctly, this is a program to take public money and put it into purchasing food from producers and then giving it to distributors. And so how does the mechanism for arriving at price occur? And how does the system for assuring quality come into play? You know, you mentioned meat products, and so there's quite a difference between different meat products that are for sale and with things like honey. There are known ways to expand the product. And so how do we as the public who are paying for this know that the quality and the price are appropriate?
So the quality and the price are all part of the negotiation between that producer and the food bank. In their contracts, the producer makes the offer of the price that they believe would be appropriate based on their product, based on the volume that they can and are interested in selling. So the agency is not a part of that, and that we see very much still directly between the food bank and the producer. The quality aspect is also taken into consideration in their contracts, and we have helped provide some language to the food banks that there is a way of not accepting the product when it's delivered if it's found to be not the quality that they believe that they were purchasing based on the contract that they set forth. So we do believe that there's an insurances not only for that consumer down the road that's going to be consuming that through our traditional food safety system, but then also for that producer who's entering into that contract on their own accord, at their own will, at their own price, and then assurances for the food banks too, so that if the quality is not met of what they believe, they can reject that. And I will say that during the LFPA program, we did have some produce that was delivered that did not meet the quality standards, and it was rejected at the delivery point and sent back.
Okay, if I may, one more clarification point though. So that what we're really looking here is a program that takes dollars from taxpayers and allocates that and authorizing then the Department of Agriculture to pull this program together and then pay for food that is privately produced and contracted to free distribution centers. That's what the ask is today then?
Yes, correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, we'll have Representative Jacobs, and then we have a conferees, and some of these questions may get answered, so if you'll be available, Kelsey, if we have any questions. So Representative Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple questions. Who qualifies for the free food? Can I just drive up in my BMW and pick up this free food, or?
I would
you have to
defer
do
to someone from the food bank system to answer that question. That's something we are not a part of.
So that wouldn't be part of Secretary rules and regulations?
No.
You mentioned that this program started in 2022, and you received a total of $5 million, but you said that you only spent $2.3 million. What are you doing with the remainder?
So there was, under the federal program, the ability for the agency to take some direct costs for developing and administering the program. It would be our vision. I think we had just under 10% of the overall budget was allocated to agency expenses. This bill would allow the agency to take a portion of the costs for administering the program. However, it is our intent that now that we have established the program, we would have very little, if any, administrative expenses, and so we do not envision on taking any of the portion of the $1 million for agency use.
So the agency took 10% of $5 million?
Between indirect costs, salary, we have with me today is actually Brittany Grother, our grant administrator who had designed and administered this grant. And so in developing the application and complying with the federal reporting requirements, we did take a portion of the grant to set up and design the program. We worked very closely with producers initially to provide them education requirements regarding food safety and food handling if they were not familiar with that. We worked with them on how to set wholesale prices, because oftentimes these producers were most accustomed to selling directly to the consumer at a smaller volume. And so we tried to provide a lot of additional education and outreach to them, that we tried to do our best of covering our costs. And while I'm sharing what's budgeted, we have come under budget of that and won't be using that full 10% over the lifetime of the grant.
If it may please the chair, could we have a report of where all that 10% monies was allocated, and see a deeper dive on all of it, actually, where the money went?
Certainly, I'd be happy to provide that. I don't have that exact breakdown for you today, but I can provide that to the committee.
So could you tell us exactly how much money is left over out of this $5 million?
So I can tell you for the entire grant program, there was $5,031,473 that was awarded to the state of Kansas. The food procurement budget was roughly 90% of $4,508,304.53. We administered, or the plan was to administer administrative budget for salary of 1.2% of a FTE, in addition to the administrative costs of all that go along with that, and I can get that a further breakdown of it. That was projected at $523,168.47. But I don't have that breakdown of what those direct and indirect costs were that we planned in the budget, but I'd be happy to provide that to you.
Very good. One more. We'll go Representative Featherston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kelsey, the way I'm reading this is you received one grant in the past for $2.5 million, of which you have spent quite a lot. And the next grant, you are in the process of spending that money this year. So there is not a missing $2.5 million.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right, very good. All right, thank you. We'll go on with the next proponent. Up next is Leslie Monty from Leafy Green Farms. Welcome to committee. The mic's on, there we go. Yep.
and members of the House Committee on Agriculture and Natural Resources. My name is Leslie Monty, and I represent Leafy Green Farms in Pittsburgh, Kansas. I support House Bill 2564. Leafy Green Farms is a veteran-owned and operated specialty crop business. We grow leafy greens, including lettuce, herbs, and more inside of repurposed refrigerated shipping containers 365 days a year, unaffected by any outside factors such as weather or pests. Our farms use 90% less water than a traditional farm, and we never use herbicides or pesticides. We do this to remain dedicated to being good stewards of our land and in our communities. In our mission to serve, it has been our longstanding goal to raise the nutritional needle, specifically in populations residing in food deserts where nutritional equity is not an equal right. If the general public does not have access to healthy choices, what about the food insecure populations? While it is known that fresh, healthy fruits and vegetables provide essential nutrients to support overall health and prevent chronic disease, some citizens simply do not have the resources. But wealth should not dictate health. Food banks are often the last to be thought of when it comes to the acquisition of fresh produce and other products. People face hunger in every county and in every congressional district in Kansas. These are our neighbors. According to data from Feeding America, 291,430 people face hunger in Kansas every day. 93,960 of these are children. The average head of lettuce consumed in Kansas comes from 1,500 miles away, oftentimes picked before it is ripe to allow days of travel time. Local producers can deliver fresh products that have been harvested that day, resulting in a much higher quality product and a much longer shelf life. We were fortunate enough to participate in the Local Food Purchase Assistant, LFPA, agreement program in 2023. We provided over 4,000 pounds of fresh lettuce and other greens to the Kansas Food Bank under this program, and we were able to deliver it to entities in our own community. We developed strong, positive, and lasting relationships with the employees and administrators. They know us by name when we arrive, always greeting us with eager smiles. When asked if there's anything else we could do for them, their answer is always the same. More is their simple yet direct response. Their request is loud and clear, and we hear them. They want accessibility to more fresh, local products for their clients, and we are currently in the process of expanding our own operation to be able to do our part to meet their request. The availability of fresh and local products benefits everyone involved. With the ability to consume local products comes not only a diet that is rich in nutrients, but a lifestyle that is rich in connection. Buying and consuming local connects the farmer with a local customer, and the local customer can in turn feel connected to a community, something that they may not often have the opportunity to feel. I have been a farmer's daughter my entire life, and I have learned many things. One of these things is that as farmers, we help our neighbors, and sometimes our neighbors need a helping hand. On behalf of Leafy Green Farms, I offer our hand in full support of House Bill 2564. Today, I would urge you to vote in favor of House Bill 2564. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak, and I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, questions? Representative, I'm going to get it today, Schingensleepen. 80%,
Thank
go
you,
ahead.
Mr. Chair. A comment. First of all, go you.
Thank you.
I think this is the kind of stuff that is really exciting, and I like everything about what you had to say. And I just want to add, you know, people who struggle to be food secure often get cans of soup and dry goods and things that are high in carbohydrates and
Right.
and of kind of minimal nutritional value compared to what you're offering. And consequently, these people offer, not just because of their situation, but also because their diets suffer from all kinds of depression.
I agree.
I remember one year when I was on my way to Israel with a delegation that I was suffering from some kind of seasonal affective depression. It was mild, but it was still noticeable. I almost called the trip off. But when we flew to Israel, all of a sudden, all the food was from right there. I mean, Israel's like the size of Indiana, right? And I mean, you walk by a salad bar and it just kind of leaps out at you that these colors even exist. And,
Right.
and in a normal grocery store, you don't even see plants like this. And so, you know, as the week went on, I got better and better and better, you know, and there is a known correlation. I mean, I've done some research on this, you know, between depression and quality of food, particularly vegetables and things like that. And And I think this is an added benefit to the kind of things that you're doing through your program, that you're making this available to folks who are really stressed already. And by giving them really high-quality food like this and doing it in the way that you're doing it it's just amazing, and I just thank you for that. It just kind of makes my day to see something like this.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Representative Probst?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for coming and testifying today. You have in your testimony that you're currently expanding, and I'm curious to know kind of the intersection of this program and those expansion efforts. Did that kind of spark did it kind of help your expansion, or kind of see that there was a need to just expand?
Yes. Kind of what I was referring to is when we would deliver all the stuff, they would always say, we want more, we want more. So kind of our mission all along has been to just help those people who don't have the access to it. If we were just to sell everything we grow to a restaurant, they could take their $15 salad, make it a $20 salad. Same people would still buy it. But this way, we're able to provide it to people who need it more. And you can kind of break those cycles. Like he was talking about, it all kind of connects. So we saw that there was such a great need, and we're from Pittsburgh, and that's not a very big town, but just the need in our area, we couldn't keep up. And we only had one contract through the Kansas Food Bank. Well, there's the other 2 food banks that support the other counties, 20 extra counties. So yeah, we just saw the need.
Representative Mosier.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your presentation. Is this hydroponics?
It is. Yes.
And thank you for, I don't know if you have veterans in your family or if you have veterans employed, but thank you for giving them that opportunity. This same kind of a project is happening up in my district on a very small scale, and I might actually put them in touch with you to see about getting involved in this. But anyway, thank you for what you do.
I'm a veteran. And
thank you.
Our founder, you're welcome. Thank you. Our founder, he is a veteran also. And then we are looking at, we hire veterans if we can find them, if they come our way. We find this way of farming to be therapeutic. And then also it helps with mobility issues. Some have ambulatory issues. They can't maybe get in the dirt or reach up high, but this is fully accessible. So.
You're selling year-round?
Yes.
The economics of it, is it worth, I mean, how big of a part of being a supplier to the food bank is, without going into dollars and cents, but, how much is, how does that impact your business? Or the business model? Is the business model based on this and then whatever else is remaining? Or?
Kind of, it is now. That wasn't how we started out. We kind of started out thinking we'll have this great product and everybody will want it. And that's exactly what happened. All the restaurants in town said, we'll take it, but don't sell it to anyone else. And that just created the problem of the same people would have access to it, but then just along the journey. So we are aiming at food banks. That's where we want to be. And if they have the money to purchase it, they are the #1 priority.
Other questions? Representative Younger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I see on your website, you sell to schools also?
We can sell to schools. We have a nonprofit arm that helps us actually put these farms into schools.
How did you get started with this farming?
Me personally or the business?
The business.
Business?
I'm looking at your website. I just find it really interesting.
Okay, sure.
How did you get started with that?
It was in the middle of the pandemic. It was in 2020. Our founder, he actually moved from California. He had some business connections with a guy in Pittsburgh. They kind of joined together to do this. But there was health issues in some of their families. And then also through the pandemic, you saw those food supply chain issues. You couldn't get toilet paper, you couldn't get fresh food. And I think the idea behind it was, well, if we can just produce it where we're eating it, that would kind of take that away.
Go ahead.
Other crops, you say lettuce, and it looks like maybe there's some spinach there or something. What else do you?
You can do lettuce, all kinds of herbs, edible flowers, arugula, Swiss chard. You can do spinach, anything leafy. Heavy things like tomatoes, they wouldn't really work because they'll fall. just because we grow vertically. But you can do horizontal hydroponics, and those would grow, but our model is just vertical just because of the amount you can get in there. So each farm has 256 vertical towers, and each one of those can hold between 10 and 12 plants. And so you're harvesting every single week, and you can get up to 600 heads of lettuce every single week.
Representative Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, if we look at this from a world food situation, we've got 8 billion people to feed every day. Could you give us just a rough idea of what your production costs are for this food as compared to more traditional methods of production and distribution?
I can give you kind of our breakdown. I don't know that I could compare it exactly to a traditional farm because I've never been a traditional lettuce farmer. But I do know we only use 9 gallons of water a day, and it grows 2 to 3 acres of food. Our main cost is water and electricity. And I think based on the budgetary things that I've seen, I don't really do the numbers, but what we usually tell people if they're interested in purchasing one or leasing one, because we do sell these farms ourselves, it's about $1,200 a month to operate the farm, and that includes your seeds, your packaging, and everything else that you would need, and that's a high number.
Thank you very much.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you. Were there other questions? Did I miss one? You sure? Okay, Representative
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
There we go. I'm going to get it.
Is this, you know, I've seen these kinds of things in the Netherlands, where they have, you know, just tall buildings that are doing exactly this, right? And everything's indoors. And the Dutch, I think, are the #1 European food producing or vegetable exporting country, and they have very little space. So obviously, you know, doing vertical agriculture has become an option for them. Is this kind of related to that, or I mean, so you say you sell the towers too? I mean, you
We sell the whole farm. The shipping container, it's 320 square feet, just kind of your average shipping container, but they're repurposed reefer units is what they're called. We just repurpose them and we put the towers in there and build them all. We have our own engineering team.
Wow.
Yes.
Sounds like another field trip, huh?
Yeah, more than welcome. Like, please go. We love tours. We
Very
love
good.
hosting.
Thank you very much. We'll retain you just in case we have questions at the end, but thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Karen, I know you've been patiently waiting. Up next to Karen Seibert from Harvesters. Welcome back to committee.
Thank you. Yes, Karen Siebert, and I'm the Advocacy and Public Policy Advisor for Harvesters, but I'm here today talking on behalf of all 3 of the food banks that we've referenced already today, Harvesters, and then the Kansas Food Bank, and also Second Harvest Community Food Bank. I think that, did you hand these out? So everyone has one of these. I know there's some questions about how food banking works, so I just want to give you a little 101. You can see on the document, Kansas Food Banks by the numbers. The service areas are in different colors here in the state. We divide up the whole state between our 3 Feeding America food banks. And what is not shown on here is that Harvesters, in addition, we also serve 10 counties in Missouri, and also the Second Harvest Community Food Bank also has a Missouri service area, so we're by state organizations. Kansas Food Bank is only Kansas, and they serve the big 85 county section of Kansas. I think what's interesting, as we all know, with the populations and the population transfer in Kansas, we have almost as many high population in our 16 counties up in the northeast quadrant as in all of the Kansas Food Bank service area. But obviously, they have a lot of different challenges in getting food to where it's needed when they have such a large geographic area to cover. Just a little bit about food banking. We actually don't do direct client service as food banks. We are a large food collection and distribution facility, and we are able to invest in trucks, relationships with large food donors, food producers. We can acquire large amounts of food, and then we turn around and provide that food to food pantries throughout the state. So we have networks of about 555 food pantries. Those are the local church food pantries you know of. in community centers and churches in your own communities. And we provide that food so that then they can focus on what they do best, which is client service, because they know their neighbors who in their communities who are in need of assistance, and often the people who come to them in need of food assistance also may need other things, which is why a lot of them also have a clothes closet, or maybe they're providing utility assistance or job training and those kinds of things. So it lets them focus on that while we focus on the infrastructure. One of our founders, Father Pat, was one of the founders of Harvesters nearly 50 years ago, said that food banking is where Mother Teresa meets the Teamsters, because it's all about logistics. It's about taking food from where there's excess to where there's need. And so that's sort of how food banking works. And we are seeing a lot of need in the communities around Kansas. I'm sure all of you who have been to the grocery store lately have seen the cost of food, and it really impacts those in the state. The food inflation increased 23.5% between February of 2020 through May of 2023. The same time frame, private sector income only went up 17%. So people are behind. They can't keep up with the pace of food inflation. And it particularly impacts people in lower incomes even more, because those folks in the bottom 20% of the income levels spend about a third of their income on food. If in the upper 20%, they spend about 8%. So the impact of food inflation on those low-income families is significant. And we're seeing, in particular, food inflation really in those healthy foods we've been talking about, the produce, the fruits and vegetables that people just can't afford. And so this has been a great program to help meet some of that need in our pantries. And I think that you also should have received a sign-on letter that was from our agencies around the community. I think there's an agency in every one of your communities, actually. We just sent this out last week, and within less than a week had all of these folks sign on. So appreciative of the food they have gotten from this program and is supporting this Farm to Food Bank program. I did want to just address a few questions that came up earlier. One is the word acquire. I can't remember who asked the question. It was very specifically chosen because this program gives us the flexibility to purchase food, but also to facilitate the donation of food. So for example, if we have a farmer who is willing to donate, has maybe zucchini left in his field. There's not a market for it anymore. It's perfectly good zucchini, but he doesn't have a market for it. He doesn't have money to hire someone to come out and harvest it. So what we can do is we can provide the money for the harvesting. If he donates the produce, we'll come in and provide that harvesting, the cost of that, and then he is at least made whole. There's a great example in Pennsylvania. So Farm to Food Bank programs have been around for years, and Pennsylvania's had one for maybe 20 years. They have a program called Bid, Buy, Donate, where they work with the local 4-H and FFA groups. And so when students are raising livestock and they show them at the fair, and then they always have the auction, and they auction off their livestock, and the kids get to keep the resources they get from that auction. So, for example, my husband's aunt down in Moline would always buy a steer from that. Well, she's now 85 and a widow and does not go through a side of beef in a year anymore. But she still has the resources to do that and wants to help. So this program would allow her to bid on that steer and make that donation, or buy that from that student, donate it to the food bank, and then we could have the funds to process that and process it and make ground beef and get that out to our food pantries. So that's why the word acquire. So it's not just purchasing food, but it's facilitating that donation. Also, the question about food safety. We follow very strict food safety guidelines for our 3 food banks. We are members of Feeding America, which is a national food bank network, and we have to follow very strict guidelines. We are actually certified by the American Institute of Baking. I believe Harvesters may have been the first food bank in the country that did that AIB certification, and now it is required of all food banks. And with regard to recalls, we are very familiar with that whole process because we deal with that every day. I could tell you stories about the peanut butter recall from a few years ago. We had to go through cases of peanut butter and finding those. So we have tracking mechanisms. So we can reach out to those agencies. If we get an alert that there was a problem, we know where that food has gone, and we can track it down to the pantry level at least. Now, whether the pantries can actually know which individuals got those, they'd have to work on that. But we do our best to know where that food has gone to so we can find people. Because we're often giving food to people who are medically fragile already, and we want to make sure that we're not doing anything that's going to make anything worse. So I think that was the list of questions I had. I'm happy to answer more questions if anyone has any.
Thank you. I think one of them is qualifications. How can someone qualify, you know, is there a financial, or is everyone eligible to partake in this regardless of income?
To the food pantries. So I give the example, we are different than, say, a Salvation Army that has chapters. Every one of the food pantries that we work with is their own entity. So the church food pantry in Sabetha is their own entity, and they have to be a 501c3. They have to follow safe food handling guidelines. They have to go through training, have an inspection every year, and they cannot sell the food. It has to be for donation only. They cannot ask for remuneration for that food that they're giving away. But beyond that, those agencies can determine their own guidelines. So there are some agencies that say we're only going to make food available to people in these zip codes because they want to make sure it's just their area. Or they may require verification, income verification. That is up to the individual pantry, and we do not determine any of those things.
Okay, questions from Ms. Siebert? Representative Featherston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Food insecurity is often thought of as an urban problem, but would you like to discuss rural food insecurity in Kansas?
Certainly. It actually is higher in rural areas than in urban areas, and I think in part there are just fewer resources. We have some counties that have just one pantry or maybe not even one, and you have to go to a neighboring county to find those food resources. And there is, I think it is a misnomer that it is not in it is not in rural areas. I don't have the stats off the top of my head on those, but it is at least as prevalent, if not more so, in rural areas.
Okay, other questions?
I would like to note one other piece on the transportation piece that someone had mentioned. The bill does allow for transportation costs to the food bank, but what is really great about this program, I think, is these resources are all going to pay farmers and to facilitate those donations to the food banks. We may need to get funds to get the transportation to the food banks, but once it's at the food banks, we're putting that on the trucks that we're already taking out to all over the state to distribute that food. So we're not adding any costs on there. It's just a matter of getting these foods to the food banks initially. And what we do in some cases, like Leafy Green Farms here, is this scenario she was talking about, I think, is what we call drop shipping. So it doesn't make sense for that food to go to Wichita to be aggregated, to get sent out. It's the coordination that the food bank provides and says, okay, we know this pantry here could use that amount of greens. Why don't you go directly to them and just take it directly to them, and then we can track all of that. It's still going through the food banks and our system, but it's much more efficient that way.
Very good. Seeing no more, Representative Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. What are the qualifications for an individual to receive this free food?
That's what I was trying to address before. That is up to the individual food pantries, each one. So they can establish if they want to have income verification at their pantry for the people coming to them for help, they can do that. That's their decision. Same thing, if they can require a simple geographic area, it's up to them.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And also, anyone else here to be a proponent, wish to testify? Yes. I thought you were, so you were here, but I don't have you on my list. I apologize. So go ahead and state your name for committee, and then you go ahead.
And my apologies as well. And I guess apologies for my dress code today. I was working on a ventilation fan in a greenhouse and lost track of time. But good afternoon, everybody. My name is Scott Thelen, and I'm a first-generation farmer, a local food distributor, and the owner of a variety of agricultural enterprises in Lawrence. I'm here today to voice my strong support for the appropriation of $1 million in funding for the Kansas Farm to Food Bank program in the upcoming budget. As a KDA-approved LFPA vendor in 2023, who grew, aggregated, and delivered over 15,000 cases of Kansas-grown produce to the Harvesters Food Bank and the Food Bank of Kansas, I feel that I can speak to the vital importance of programs like this on our state's food system as a whole, both in supporting the growth and creation of new agricultural markets for our state's producers, while also supporting the health and well-being of our state's most vulnerable populations. Some of the program highlights from 2023, or from our participation in 2023, include delivering over 3,500 cases of organically grown produce and over 2,000 cases of conventionally raised produce from our farm to food banks across the state. Those items included beets, tomatoes, summer and winter squash, leafy greens like collards and kale, tomatoes, peppers, cabbages, and a variety of other crops. We also aggregated and delivered over 9,600 cases of produce from 8 other growers across the state, both small and large. And I think that that's really key to remember, because for many small producers, the aggregation and delivery of these items to a food bank can be challenging. And so the utilization of growers to aggregate and distribute, I think, is of utmost importance to building the food system. So some of those items included green beans, potatoes, melons, sweet corn, tomatoes, peppers, and cucumbers. And what that did is it allowed us to maximize the use of our cold storage, our operations refrigerated trucks, and our cold chain distribution capacities. And so adding these items into our already established routes to Wichita, Topeka, Kansas City, to maximize the efficiency of our operation to benefit not only our operation, but growers across the state. And finally, this program helped us develop relationships with the Food Bank of Kansas and harvesters that ended up increasing our farm's donated produce that wasn't associated with the sale of produce to harvesters by over 30,000 pounds. The Kansas Farm to Food Bank program is more than just a line item and state funding program. It's an investment in and a testament to our state's commitment to fostering and growing sustainable and robust local food systems that benefit all stakeholders, from farmers to families, both urban and rural. By purchasing locally grown foods, this program not only provides fresh and nutritious food for distribution through already well-established food distribution networks within our state's food banks, but also stimulates rural economies and communities by keeping funds within our state and supporting Kansas's farmers. The positive impacts of this program extend well beyond economic stimulation and nutritional support, as it helps provide new opportunities for producers to grow their operations, increase their growing capacities, and ultimately scale their operations to enter into newer, larger volume markets across the region, all while reducing and minimizing food loss and waste. Your support of this program is imperative to the future growth of our state's food system, and I hope that with your support of this program, it can continue to be a catalyst of investment and growth in our state's producers as we work to build a better food system. And I'll open it up to questions.
Yes, you better leave that for us, so we can make sure it's in the record.
Certainly can.
Yeah,
I can
or send it
the
to us or
committee
whatever,
if that
so
works for you all.
we can see that. So any questions for Scott? Okay. Oh, Representative Gardner?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, you mentioned in your testimony that this is opening up the avenue for new markets and expanding local food production and decreasing waste. Do you see any time in the foreseeable future that the momentum from that and the economies that you harvest from that would pay the expenses of this so that the public no longer would be required to subsidize this program?
So that's a great question. Is it a producer of food that sells to private entities? I don't want to say that if I scale, I will, have more food to give away. But that being said, as we've grown in our operation size, we do have more produce that's of second grade or coal grade that ends up being donated to our local food banks and other charitable organizations in our communities. And so I think programs like this offer the opportunity for farms to expand, but I don't want to say that it would allow me to distribute more, number 2 product to the food banks. It certainly could, but That's not the goal of this program. The goal of this program is to deliver high-quality food to our communities most vulnerable. Not that tomato with a big blemish in it, not that potato that's about to go bad, but something that is fresh picked from our community to our community members. I hope that answers that question a little bit.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
One more question, and then we for interest of time, we need to move on. So Representative Schlingensieben.
I'm just going to say I've heard about your operation from years. Your mother told me about it over dinner once many years ago, and it's nice to finally see you and meet you here. Thank you.
Nice to hear that. Thank you, guys.
Very good. Thank you so much. And then, yeah, if you could either leave your testimony, we'll scan it in, or send it to us, and that will be fine. So anyone else wanting to be a proponent to testify? Seeing none, we do have written only from Claudia Hissong from Kansas Farm Bureau, Tom Buller, Kansas Rural Center, Mallory Lutz from the Kansas Food and Farm Coalition, and Alan G. Stovall from AJ Honey Farms, LLC. I have no opponents, but is there anyone that wants to testify as an opponent to this bill? Seeing none, we do have two written-only opponents, Angel Cushing, who is a private citizen, and Jill O'Connor, listed as a Kansas Precinct Committee woman. So those are the two, and you'll find those in your date there on the date today for our committee information. And I have no one for neutral. Anyone who wants to testify as neutral to this bill? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing on House Bill 2564. We will now open the hearing up on House Bill 2608, authorizing the Animal Health Commissioner to adopt rules and regs to administer the Poultry Disease Control Act and more. So, Mr. Hamilton, you are on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'll just give some brief background before diving into the bill itself. The National Poultry Improvement Plan that was established back in the 1930s to diminish the spread of certain poultry diseases and to promote the testing and monitoring for such diseases. Under current Kansas law in KSA 2911, which is not being amended by this law, it's staying the same, it states that each hatchery within the state must be designated as a national plan hatchery by the Animal Health Commissioner of the Kansas Department of Agriculture or meet equivalent requirements for pullorum and fowl typhoid control. Each hatchery supply flock within Kansas must be designated as U.S. pullorum typhoid clean by the commissioner or must meet equivalent requirements. And then additionally, under current law, no poultry may be shipped into Kansas other than from a source that is designated as U.S. pullorum typhoid clean under the plan or that meets equivalent requirements. So let's dive into Section 1 of the bill. It would grant the commissioner authority to adopt rules and regulations for the administration and enforcement of the Poultry Disease Control Act. Section 2 would require each person participating in the plan to pay the commissioner an annual plan participation fee not to exceed $50. Section 3 of the bill would require each person performing any testing or poultry disease diagnostic services pursuant to the Act to pay an annual certification fee not to exceed $50. Any person who requests testing or poultry disease diagnostic services pursuant to the Act would be required to pay the commissioner a fee not to exceed $100 per visit to each location participating in the plan. Language would be added to state that using services performed by someone not certified or authorized to do so under the Act shall not be considered sufficient to support a national plan hatchery or U.S. pullorum typhoid clean designation. Section 4 would state the designation under the plan could be revoked for failure to pay the annual plan participation fee within a 60-day grace period. House Bill 2608 would become effective upon publication in the statute book. And with that, I'd be happy to take any preliminary questions.
Questions, Mr. Hamilton? Seeing none, thank you. Okay, we will go to Heather O'Hara right quick for a fiscal update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The fiscal note states that enactment of the bill would generate total fee revenue of $18,250 in both fiscal year 2025 and 2026. The department indicates that the new fees would partially offset the estimated total expenses of $35,500 in fiscal year 2025 and $40,500 in fiscal year 2026. Any fiscal effect associated with the bill is not reflected in the governor's budget report.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions there? Seeing none, we will now go to our proponents. And first up is Kelsey Olson with the Department of Agriculture. Welcome back again. Kyle should just put that down when he's done, rather than you have to jump up and get it. So,
You know,
yeah.
I can barely reach it, but I
yeah.
can weigh it down. Thank you again, members of the committee. I stated I am Kelsey Olson. I'm with the Kansas Department of Agriculture. I would also like to point out with me today, additionally, is Dr. Justin Smith, our Animal Health Commissioner, and Dr. Sarah McReynolds serves as our Assistant Animal Health Commissioner. As Kyle noted, pardon me, let me back up. Our poultry industry is quite a successful industry, a highly valuable industry in the state of Kansas, although it is relatively small. We do have some innovative high-value egg laying, as well as poultry genetic companies, in addition to our commercial egg layers, as well as our game bird producers in the state of Kansas. Approximately $82.9 million are generated annually by poultry producers and processors within the state of Kansas. That's all based on our economic in-plan software data that we utilize. Just to kind of give you a rough perspective, because I know we don't always talk about our poultry industry in here. So in 1935, the National Poultry Improvement Program was established nationwide. This program is a voluntary state and federal cooperative program that does provide the certification for the poultry industry with the goal of eliminating and reducing poultry diseases. Specifically, Polarum typhoid is a key disease that we're talking about. As it was mentioned that Kansas is a Polarum typhoid-free state, many of our neighboring states and states across the country are also are designated as Polarum typhoid-free, meaning that any poultry shipments must be certified Polarum typhoid-free in order to enter into that state. Additionally, our U.S. trading partners are often Polarum typhoid-free nations as well. So in 1945, Kansas became a participant in the National Poultry Improvement Program. Our Division of Animal Health serves as the official state agency for that program and has the administration and oversight for the NPIP requirements. Up until this point, all of the services that the Division of Animal Health has provided the poultry industry have been done so at no cost since 1945. House Bill 2608, as pointed out, would establish the ability for the agency to acquire a participation fee for anyone who voluntarily wants to participate in this program. It would also establish the authority for the agency to charge up to $100 per location that we are requested to test. And subsequently, the National Poultry Improvement Program allows for certified testers. So some of our larger facilities may want to certify an employee of theirs to conduct some of the testing, initial testing processes on their facility. And the agency also certifies those individuals who choose to be tested. For reference, we have currently about 105 businesses or entities that want to participate and have participated in the NPIP program in Kansas. We have certified 65 testers, and there in 2023 we had roughly 60 locations that we went and tested in 2023. I would note that the antigen product that we need to test has been limited supply, so our testing has actually probably been down from previous years. But just wanted to give you a reference of the volume of work that we have been doing to support the program. So with that, it is a brief bill. I'll try to keep my remarks brief and stand for any questions you may have.
Any questions? Seeing none, I guess we're too chicken to ask. Oh,
No.
Representative Roth? I have, well, I was trying to come up with something because the sorghum guys left. They didn't want to, I thought the chickens eat sorghum. But anyway, Representative Roth.
Yes, thank you, Chairman, and thanks for that presentation there. So a testing fee not to exceed $100 per visit at each location. How many visits can be made to a location?
We go out and test when we're requested to come on site, and so depending.
It's only upon request?
Yes, it's upon request.
Okay, and then how prevalent is poultry disease in Kansas?
If I may, I might defer to one of our veterinarians who might be able to speak to that.
That's fine.
Doctor, if you want to just, your name for the record and.
Yes. Justin Smith, I serve as the Kansas Animal Health Commissioner here for the state of Kansas, and thank you for the opportunity and thank you for the question. So when you say poultry disease, I guess I would ask a little bit of a clarification. I mean, the Pleuron typhoid is relatively rare. In fact, it's very rare. We haven't had a case of it in the Kansas in tens of years, frankly. Since I've been on board, we haven't had a case. And so it is rare, but it is still something that's nationwide, and it is something that's worldwide. It's still an issue that we want to make sure that we keep it that way. So there is an opportunity there. But when you talk about animal diseases, or poultry diseases, there's lots of other diseases out there. And the one that comes to mind that's really been on our plate here in the last 6 months is avian influenza. So that's a disease that we respond to and frankly have been responding to here in the month of December and January.
Go ahead.
Well, yeah, my question was, because I'm not familiar with poultry production or whatever, or it was the Poultry Disease Control Act. And so is what you had stated, and that was my question. So of the number of poultry producers in Kansas, is there the avian flu that you're referencing then in most of those producers, or is it, what's the percentage of producers that have a poultry disease in their operation?
Yeah, and I don't mean to evade your question. There's a lot of diseases that are potentially out there and a lot of them are non-regulated diseases. So Salmonella typhimurium or Pleuron typhoid, avian influenza, Merrick's disease, those are all regulated diseases, where in fact there's a lot of diseases, whether it's coccidiosis, and I'm going to go blank here, but there's a lot.
It's kind of like, let's say you've got 100 producers, and my question is, how many out of that 100 producers are sick?
I hope none, to be real honest with you. And I say that, and I don't mean to be, but I mean, the goal of these producers is to have a poultry flock that isn't. Is there an opportunity for them to become sick tomorrow or the next day? Yeah, there is the opportunity because of the viral and the bacterial pathogens that are out there, much like us. I mean, I would hope that none of us are sick here, but at the same time, that's not saying tomorrow somebody won't be. And I apologize if I'm not addressing it appropriately.
Thank you, Chairman.
Right. Stay right there. Got one more question from our advisor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I promise I'm not going to make a habit of this, but Kyle Hamilton with the Revisor's Office. I was just wanting some clarification about the word voluntary. So from what I understand, state participation in the national plan, that's voluntary. But if I'm a hatchery in a state that is now part of the plan, is it voluntary for that individual hatchery to participate? Or are they required to fulfill the requirements of the plan?
So if they meet a level and they're moving product across state lines, it's basically required. There is some opportunities, but no, in all honesty, if they're moving product across state lines, it is required.
Good.
Thank you.
Stand by. I guess I'm glad you're here. Representative Schlingensiepen.
Is typhoid pylorem the same thing as Salmonella enterica? Is that the same thing, or is that a different kind of a disease?
It's related, but it's a different organism.
It's a different organism.
Yes.
So is there any case of typhoid pylorem like in other kinds of fowl in the United States? I mean, is this outside of hatcheries and so forth? I mean, is this a communicable virus from other birds that exist in the United States, and is part of this plan to kind of keep that from transferring from one avian species to another, or?
Yeah, so it can cross species, and I think that's the reason we want the surveillance plan in place, is to make sure that we don't miss that. But yes, it can cross species.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Smith, this bill appears to be dealing primarily with pylorem, and I understand that. But do you anticipate in the foreseeable future any other diseases might be added to the testing of or for monitoring of poultry in Kansas?
So in all fairness, the MPI program does look at other diseases, and other diseases are part of it. From the perspective of this bill, it is only Salmonella or pylorem typhoid. I don't foresee that we will, but yes, you can be AI certified flock through the MPI program. You can be mycoplasma free. So there is other diseases that certain hatcheries and certain individuals want to be a part of, but that's not a requirement upon us.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Again, thanks for being here, Dr. Smith.
Thank you.
You're always prepared. Okay, let's move on to our next proponent, Taylor Nickel from the Kansas Livestock Association. Committee, be gentle. This is her first time testifying. So welcome to committee.
Thanks, Chairman. Again, as the Chairman stated, my name is Taylor Nickel with the Kansas Livestock Association. It is not my first time testifying, but first time testifying here. Second time, so you got me on that one. But I want to tell you all that I'm here on behalf of the Kansas Livestock Association and our over 5,700 members across the state. I want to thank you all for allowing us to come and testify and share our views on House Bill 2608. KLA would stand in support of that bill. Jumping on down, KLA has member-driven policy that states, therefore be it resolved, the Kansas Livestock Association supports funding the Kansas Department of Agriculture, Division of Animal Health through the State General Fund or from a broad-based fee collection system funded proportionally from all species based on their demands on the Kansas Department of Agriculture, Division of Animal Health resources. We believe House Bill 2608 would help to cover agency costs relating to the poultry programs within the state that are currently being funded through the Animal Disease Control Fund. A significant number of services are being provided to the industry through poultry programs such as the poultry disease prevention plans and diagnostic testing. The poultry industry does not have to pay fees into the Animal Disease Control Fund, and therefore for these services, and therefore livestock producers are the ones footing that bill. They're helping support the Animal Disease Control Fund through fees collected by the agency at livestock auction markets, through feedlot operators' licenses, livestock dealers' licenses, certificates of veterinary inspection, and calf hood vaccination tags. House Bill 2608 would ensure all species are remitting fees to support the Animal Disease Control Fund. Thank you again for the opportunity to submit KLA's view to the committee. We would ask the committee to approve House Bill 2608 favorably for passage.
Questions, Ms. Nickel? Representative Minix.
Been a long day, Taylor. How would this bill affect fowl mastitis?
I don't think that's a thing, sir.
Bingo!
I am not aware of a chicken with an udder, so
She understands what she's talking about.
I'd like to see it.
Didn't know if we could maybe get that in the governor's budget, do research on that maybe. Looking for another $1 million, are you? Okay. Other questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Other proponents? You know, that's on video for the rest of, you know. Oh, okay. All right. I kind of did too. I wasn't sure. You never know. I missed that day. Other proponents from this bill? Seeing none, we do not have other written proponents. Anyone neutral? on 2806? Seeing none. Anyone opposed to testify on House Bill 2806? Seeing none, we close the hearing on House Bill 2608, sorry. Hearing is closed on House Bill 2608. Okay, committee, thank you for your attention and participation today. Lots of good questions. Tomorrow, we will be back and we will have Dr. Ernie Minton, the Dean of the College of Agriculture at Kansas State University. So we'll talk about a lot of different things, always a lot of information, so come with your questions and so on. So we will not plan on meeting then on Thursday we will be meeting as well, and then Friday we won't. And then next week will probably be a pretty busy week as well, as it's, I believe, the last week we can get things done. So we will work towards that. So anything else for the good of the cause and or committee? We are adjourned.